So hi and welcome to the second episode of what's now called Talking Heads. So we've got to thank Bill Clark for the name and recommendation via YouTube. We've also got a new sponsor. That's Patronus Sprinter Motorcycle Engine Oil. So a big thanks to them for sponsoring this. We hope that this is going to kind of keep you entertained while we're all in lockdown. It's a difficult time, but hopefully we're going to give you some ideas of some stuff to do in this video. So I also want to shout out to some of the people who took the time to comment and leave good stuff for us on the YouTube channel. We've got, and Facebook too, we've got Craig Simpson, Andy Todd, Tom Evans, Lynn Smith and Timothy Mills and everyone else who said nice things about us. So let's quickly run around who everybody is in case you didn't see the first episode. First of all, seniority first, obviously not in age, Steve Rose.
I'm Steve. I'm the publisher at Bike Social, which effectively means that when anything goes wrong, it's my fault. When anything goes right, it's everybody else's. Down to everybody else's brilliance. That's it, really. I've been riding for 36 years now. Ridden hundreds of bikes as a road tester. Been road testing for 25 years. Owned many bikes. Used to do a bit of buying and selling and all that kind of stuff. So, generally for me, the best bike in the world is the last bike I rode. It's motorcycling I'm really in love with. And which of
those two you're sitting between is the last bike you rode?
The very last bike I rode is this one, the new GT scooter. Electric scooter. I did 20 miles on it the night before we got locked down. We got it on test. Hopefully I'll get to do more miles than that on it. It's a really interesting electric scooter because it's really well put together. It's very affordable for an electric bike, and it's also got batteries that come out. We showed in the last episode. So if you live in the top floor of an apartment block, you can take the batteries out and charge them in your flat.
Cool. Steve Lamb, going in age order now.
Yeah, thanks for that. Steve Lamb, production manager at Bike Social. So general dog's body, really, by any other name. Do all the uploads to the site, do all the ad work. Been riding same time as you, really. 96 was it? We passed our tests.
Yep.
Did what was the intensive course then, so we spent a Saturday wobbling around Peterborough on 125s, SR 125s, did a week's intensive course, I passed my butt test second time, can't remember what you did,
second time for me.
Then did exactly what we weren't supposed to do, which was go from a 125 to a 600, which is probably why they changed the law just after we passed our tests. So I've not actually had that many bikes since then. So I've had about 3 or 4 bikes. Currently on this bike here, which is my own Scrambler Classic, which I absolutely love. Bought that in 16 after a 2-week road test. That one of those things where you just instantly gel with the bike. And currently kindly on loan from Suzuki is our Bergman 400, which I've been commuting on for the last couple of months over the winter, which, to be honest, it's a maxi scoot. It does everything reasonably well. It's never going to excite you, as Luke was saying last week. It's not the hottest kid on the block, but when you need a reliable set of wheels to get into work every morning, then it's absolutely tip top and has done the job really well.
Cool, sounds good. Obviously, I'm John Milbank, consumer editor. Obviously, we grew up riding together, really, didn't we? From '96. This is my ZX6R. This is a Royal Enfield Interceptor I've got on loan from Royal Enfield, and that's the last bike I rode just before lockdown. Loved it. Haven't been able to get out since. I'm just looking forward to tinkering. My garage is a right mess at the moment, but that's actually because I'm trying to fix the brakes on my car. I've owned 20 bikes so far. Got an S1000 XR. But yeah, so most importantly, we've got a special guest this week. Nick Nomikos, Sales and Service Manager of Two Wheel Centre in Harpenden. Nick, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, what you ride.
Hello guys, my name's Nick. I'm from the Two Wheel Centre in Harpenden. We're a family-run business of 29 years. We do MOTs and servicing, sales. We're stockist for Oxford products. Basically keep all bikers and bikers' needs where we can sort of help them. We will. At the moment, we are closed because of this virus, but we are open for key workers and essential repairs. Background to me, I've been riding bikes since I was 6. My first bike was a Yamaha Tdm that I trashed up the garden with until I got hold of a KX125 and decided to go over the Sundon pits where I used to ride that illegally and generally get chased by everyone. First road bike was an NTV 650, which was also our courtesy bike that I wrote off. Dad wasn't too happy with that, but that was my first sort of road bike. And then I had basically pick of the litter, really. I was allowed to buy a bike, and as long as I didn't break it, I could ride it and then sell it, which has gone from 916 Ducatis to 250 RGB 250s. When I was younger, I was all into the sports bikes, which then turned into R1150 RT, which I had for about 6 years, which I loved. And in the end, at 90-odd thousand miles, I decided to get rid of it. And now currently is K1200 GT, which I have to say I prefer the RT, but it's been doing its job, and I've been enjoying it. But no, thank you for the invitation, and hopefully we can get some good feeds out there for people to watch.
Yeah, no, good to have you on. We should actually use that BMW that you've got now as a blood biker, don't you, Nick? And
yeah, that's right. So we're currently not getting as many jobs as we used to, but yeah, it's something that you guys can volunteer to. Unfortunately, you don't get paid anything for doing it, but it does have, you really do enjoy it, and it's a great charity. And I started doing it a couple of years ago now, purely because I'm a sucker to a tin shaker. And you go around and you keep putting money in these tins, and you think, well, are they actually doing anything with your money? Whereas, you know, with blood running, it's your bike, it's your money, your time, you know, and you know when you pick it up, a sample or some blood, and take it to a blood bank or take it to a hospital, you know, you get a really good feeling inside. You know, you finish a shift and you think you've accomplished something, you know, you've done something, and that's what I love about it.
no, that's really cool. I actually got to know Nick through, I bought my Ducati S4, Monster S4R from Nick, and got to know you from there. And Nick actually is like our technical advisor for a lot of the maintenance features we do. So we're going to talk a bit about maintenance in here. But before we do, Steve Rose, you've got a quick update on what's been happening this week, haven't you?
Yeah, just very, very, very quick. The thing that blokes of a certain age, which I like, is how people like me describe ourselves. The most interesting thing I saw this week was Honda launched a sort of an image of a concept bike based on the old CB, looked like the old CB 900 from the sort of late 70s, early 80s, based on the current CB 1000R. So the CB 1000 with a single-sided swinging arm, sort of 5-blade engine, that kind of thing. But they styled it up with a petrol tank and tail unit that looked like the kind of, you know, old Honda CB 900. And so for those of us brought up in that kind of that era, that was one of those bikes that just looked right. And because of the sort of racing connotations, we all want to win at some point. Most of us probably own one at some point. For most of us, it was our first experience of an engine going seriously pop, because they had a fairly horrible reputation for cam chain disasters. So we all learned a lot about buying cheap bikes when we had one of those. And but it's really interesting to see that Honda are tapping into that. And probably you can see from sort of response on social media, lots of love for that kind of bike. Be interesting to see if they make it. A couple of other interesting BMW stories this week. BMW are going to announce their R18, this kind of long-awaited cruiser that they've been. We've sort of seen spy shots and drawings and all kinds of pictures of it for almost a year now, and it's a bike that clearly looks like it's been designed for the American market. It looks very much like a lot of the big Harleys. They're doing several versions of it, from what we can tell. There's a bagger and a blagger and a bogger and a whatever the other things that begin with B and end in ger are. It looks huge. The kind of official release is Friday night, which I think will be just after we're recording this before that. So by the time this goes out, probably the official pictures will already be there. But it's an air-cooled boxer engine. I think a bigger version of the R9T engine, from what we know. If you're into that kind of thing, it's really interesting, and I think there'll be people at Harley and Indian who will be watching it very closely. In some ways, the more interesting news from BMW this week was that they're not going to be attending EICMA and Intermot, the two big European shows this year. they're going to launch their new models for 2021 on different platforms. Now that's, I think, possibly got a lot to do with what's going on at the moment, and they're probably looking at getting all their resource in the right places and all the stuff they got to do. The work for a big show, I'm sure if the show's in October, the work for it probably starts now. So, it may be that that's just a simple reason why, or it may be that they're looking at different ways of launching bikes. Several manufacturers have launched bikes in the last few years before the shows and away from the shows because they get more coverage, more focused, dedicated coverage. At showtime, often, you've got 10 bikes being launched in a day. And so you get a lot of interest, but everything's diluted between those 10 bikes. Other couple of bits and pieces. There was a story that I saw going around yesterday about how, kind of from the remains of the Norton story, that apparently the rights for the Norton 961 engine, which is kind of the air-cooled commando-based engine that formed the kind of the first few years of the Norton revival, that's been sold to China, apparently, the rights for that. I still can't work out whether that was an April Fool or not, but it appeared in a few places, and it's not the biggest story because Norton aren't in business at the moment, and that wasn't the focus of their future anyway. And of course, the other big news of the week is that Suzuki have now launched a red version of the Katana.
Big news.
Big news.
But I've got to say, actually, I thought it looked pretty cool, and I wasn't a massive fan of it before. I quite liked it red. One other thing that did happen this week was we had an exclusive video with John McGuinness, where we had Bennett's customers. Everybody can watch the video, so I urge you to check it out in the link that we'll bring up now. It's on rewards.bennetts.co.uk. So we got Bennett's customers, Bennett's Rewards members, to ask John McGuinness some questions. And the top one won a Shoei X-Spirit 3. So yeah, check out that video because it is fascinating insight into John McGuinness's life.
Great question. Another hard question. Not a great question there, to be honest.
So, question from who we've got? We've got Simon Beerling said to us he owns a Guzzi V7, but he's considering a Tracer 900 GT or an F850 GS. He wants it for city commuting and touring, and he did look at the new F900 XR, but he reckoned that was too compact for him. So, I've test ridden it. I'll start just because I've test ridden the F900 XR. I'm 5'10". I didn't find it too compact. Simon didn't say how tall he is. I definitely suggest test riding one. I really enjoyed that. Really good bike. The screen was pretty buffeting. That'd annoy me for touring, so you're going to need to get something else. That was a surprise because the S1000 XR screen's really good. But other than that, personally, I'd say the Tracer 900 GT has probably got the more characterful engine, that triple. But you need to test ride them both. What do you guys think?
I haven't ridden the XR, but I've done quite a lot of miles on the F850 GS and on the Tracer 900. They're quite different bikes. The GS does feel like a GS. It feels like an adventure bike. It's got that kind of very tall, narrow seat, very wide handlebars. It's a lovely thing to ride. I like that 850 twin engine. It's a very easy bike to ride, like most modern BMWs are. It has that kind of very light controls, very light throttle, very light clutch. Suspension is good. One thing to be aware of, I think, with all BMWs is you look at the kind of the basic price and you think, oh, that's similar to a Tracer, perhaps. By the time you actually leave the showroom and you've fitted all the extras that you must have, it's very easy to spend a lot more money. So just make sure you're kind of aware of that, or that the deal's good enough, or your Part X is good enough. It's a good bike, but yeah, it's just make sure you're kind of comparing like for like with spec. Tracer 900 GT has got really good spec as standard. It's got things like heated grips as standard. It's got better suspension than the kind of standard MT-09, just more suited for touring. There was some talk on the really early versions of the Tracer 900 before the GT about them having a little bit of a handlebar weave at high speed. I never saw that when I rode it, and on the GT certainly didn't notice that. But the suspension is set quite soft. When you ride it, it does that. As you come out of corners, it sort of feels like the front suspension particularly is extending. It almost feels like you're wheeling. And for someone like me who can't wheelie, doesn't wheelie, wheelies aren't a part of my riding. It's quite odd to be coming out of corners and having that sensation. So like a lot of bikes, it takes a week or so to get used to it. It's got a quick shifter on the GT as well, it's kind of okay. It's better than not having a quick shifter. It's not the best quick shifter out there. But generally, like John said, the engine's lovely. Fuel consumption's okay. It's one of those, it's a lovely bike to ride. And my overriding memory of it, I did one really long day on it when I had it, about 420 miles. And at the end of that day, I was just as comfortable and enjoying the ride just as much and happy to ride another however many 100 miles if I had to. It was just, that was the thing. Sometimes it takes that many miles on a bike on a day before you really come to appreciate it. You know, many bikes are comfortable for 150, 200 miles. That thing, by the end of the day, it was just, I could have just sat on it forever.
Cool. Nick, we mentioned this a while ago, didn't we? We were chatting about this. You've had some customers come in with questions like this, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult, especially with new models coming out and stuff, which bike is going to be good for you. And I have to agree with you, John, that he has to go out and ride them all, but he has to ride them in the parameters in which he wants to use it. It's pointless borrowing it and driving around, like, you know, finding a dealer, say, you know, miles away from where he lives to go and ride it, and he can't use it to do his route to work, or you know, actually get on the, you know, if he gets a dealer that's in town, he can't just actually get it on the motorway and go off and do sort of, you know, 50, 100 miles. Most places now, you know, when you're road testing a bike, they want it back in an hour, and you can't, if you're stuck in London, you can't really go anywhere for an hour. So maybe take 2 road tests of the bike, or 2 different dealers and stuff. Also, I think all the bikes are, you know, they're all pretty much on like level playing fields to the point of the suspension, the brakes and all that. But have a look at the service schedule, see the differences, see what it's going to cost you. If for instance, you like a particular bike better, but it's going to cost you more, you know, you've got to take that into consideration. Also, this gen, his bike is quite narrow. You know, these bikes could be a bit wider. Check the bars, because if he's going to commute on it and the bars are quite wide, we've had customers before that haven't bought bikes, so they go, normally I just fold in my mirrors and I'm straight through the traffic, you know, but I won't buy this bike because the bars are a lot wider and it's got the hand guards on it and stuff. I'm just not going to fit through the traffic, you know. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration before he goes out and parts with his money.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, when we're reviewing bikes, all we can do really is, I always think our job is to highlight the good and the bad of any machine based on its typical audience. But ultimately, we can't say to somebody, buy that, because that's what I love about bikes. They're so personal. I mean, Steve, for you and I, when we started riding, I bought a CBR 600, you bought a GSXS 600, but it's been so transformational when you bought that Scrambler.
Yeah, and that, you know, I can put a bit of a one-sided argument into this one. I've ridden the 850 GS, thought it was a fantastic bike. I mean, I'm only 5'6", so a lot of these adventure bikes kind of put me off because I think they're going to be far too tall for me. And actually, I think we had the correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, it was the 750 GS as well, which is the slightly smaller one, the more road bias one. And actually, I preferred the 850. It just gave that really nice plush ride. It felt, I know there is a price premium, but it showed in everything that it did, really. It felt a much more prestigious bike. But yeah, get out and ride it. And as you say, John, we kind of, I think we were pressured into sports bikes because everybody, you know, late 90s, everybody had sports bikes, didn't they? CBRs were everywhere. GSXRs were everywhere. R6s. I kind of couldn't quite get into that full-on sports bike mode. I went for the GSX, which was, you know, a sports bike of yesteryear, really. Didn't suit me at all. Totally the wrong riding position for me. From that, I went to a Phaser and then onto the Scrambler, and I think it's opened up a whole new aspect of riding for me. You know, so just get out there and try it. I don't think whatever you buy these days, I don't think you'll be disappointed with it. One of the lasting impressions really that I've had this year or last year really is just the sheer number of bikes that I've been lucky enough to ride. And a bit like you, Steve, I just love the last bike that I've been on. I think they've all been fantastic. And apart from one exception that John will probably quote, I don't think there are any bad bikes out there.
Yeah, no,
Well,
I agree with that. And also, just because, you know, you ride a specific bike and it doesn't tick your box doesn't mean it's not going to tick someone else's box.
Yeah.
You know, so it's difficult for us to sit here and say, well, this doesn't do this or this doesn't do that, but it doesn't do it for us. But for someone else, it could be something that they're looking for.
Yeah.
and the other thing is, going back to your sports bike thing, is, I mean, I remember, you know, when we were fixing bikes back in the 90s, you know, we you know, if you wanted to go fast, you had to have a sports bike, because everything else was solid discs, cross-ply tyres, you know, and stuff like that. So, you know, at the time, I mean, 91 was the first year, you know, Honda came out with radial tyres and, you know, all this sort of stuff, which was amazing, you know, and the only thing you had to compare to it of a normal bike was a GS850G. Well, that was like, you know, it's too heavy, frame flex and stuff like that. And I always giggle when I read reviews and they go, this year's 2020 bike, ooh, bit flighty, bit this, bit that. I was thinking, but if you rode bikes of the 80s, you know, you'd see that any bike that rolls off a production line is a winner. You know, you can't go wrong, you know.
It's very true. And we see it, you know, when we ride. John's ZX6 is probably an exception, because John has pretty much rebuilt that like a new bike. But
with the help of Nick.
Yeah.
You've done all right by yourself.
Yeah. But when we ride, you know, when we ride even bikes that are 10, 15 years old now, you really notice the difference, you know, how far brakes have come on, for example, and how far, you know, how much better fuel injection is now than it was even 10 years ago. And, you know, Bennett's has just bought a SP1, Honda SP1 to give away in a competition. And when you ride that, it's, you know, it doesn't feel like an old bike to me, because I remember it being launched. But when you ride it now, the brakes feel terrible and the fuel injection feels really sharp, and, you know, it's a really interesting experience. And yeah, we forget how lucky we are, I think, sometimes.
But tyre technology has also come a long way, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You look at tyre technology, last sort of 3-4 years, I mean, it's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it, really?
Because we still haven't even started the maintenance stuff. But before we do, last week we promised that we were going to say what's the best 2K commuter anybody should buy. So let's go around us three amateurs first before we ask Nick. I'd say a Honda Dominator, because that was it cost me 500 quid. I had an NX 650 Dominator, Honda. Absolutely loved it. It was knackered. It had been seized. Dickie Fincher used to be the editor of Bike Magazine. Apparently he'd been riding it. It seized on him, so he stopped. Obviously, he had no choice. Turned the engine off, waited a while, turned it on, it fired up. Good, it's running, and kept riding again. So I bought it for £500. The piston was cracked. There's a picture of it on the screen now. But I loved that bike. That was the only bike I've actually managed to slide at choice, and I learnt to wheelie that. And it was an awesome winter hack commuter. I didn't have a car at the time, I just used that. But good luck finding one for under £2,000 now, because they all got turned into cafe races. So, Steve Lamb, you've got a perfect sub £2,000 bike, haven't you? Not in view.
Yeah, well, harking back to our time wobbling around city centres on SR125s, a friend of a, well, actually it was your brother-in-law, had an SR125 for sale. How long ago now was it? 4 years? So I paid the princely sum of £230 for that, I think. Various boxes that you can see scattered around the garage. Bits of it are still in there. New parts are in there. I will get round to rebuilding it. It's supposed to be a kind of brat tracker, flat seat, high, wide bar version of it, but it's something to fiddle with in the winter, if you'll pardon the expression. I've kind of cheated with my choices of sub £2,000. One that I've had my eye on for some time now, but as usual, when you start looking at these things, you can see that prices are starting to creep up, and that's Yamaha Tdm 900.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely cracking bike in my view. That weird 270-degree crank-angled parallel twin, giving it a bit of a V-twin roar. Nice low seat. I think they're, what are they? Ooh, check these notes. 825mm seat height, so, you know, easily accessible for a whole range of riders. Ideal for cutting through traffic, I think, because it gives you a really good high view. Tank range, not so great, but as I've been looking at them over the last 12 months, really, you know, some of the good examples, low mileage good examples, are knocking on the door of £4,000 now. So, considering they were 8.3 new, you know, that they're almost a good investment. So, that would be my choice with the heart. My choice with the head, and I'm going to surprise a few people now. Last year we had an opportunity to ride Suzuki's little V-Strom 250, and the one thing that stood out on that bike for me was the engine. It was an absolute peach of a little 250 engine, had about 11,000 red line or something, and it just hummed away smooth as silk. Now, the V-Stroms are still high in price. That engine is used in the V-Strom, the GSX 250R, which all the cool kids on the block want those because that's the latest, greatest MotoGP thing. But it's also used in the GW 250 Inazuma, which, when that was released, went down like a ton of bricks, which is great for used prices because it means they're dirt cheap. So I spent a little time online last night, and when I finished that, I had a look at Auto Trader, and I found I always do a little search. I always try and maintain the search to within 20 miles of home because I think, you know, you stand a good chance of going to have a look at the bike. It limits the choice. There are so many good bikes out there. It kind of limits the choice. So local to me is a 2016 bike, only done 7,000 miles. It's from a main dealer, so it comes with warranty and finance, and that's up at 1,995. And I think, to be honest, for a little, you know, if you're doing a commute like I am, 20 miles into work and back, that little 250 was an absolute pleasure to ride. You're not going to be the coolest kid on the block, but, you know, at 80, well, they report 80 miles to the gallon, you're probably not going to get much off that. And with a 13-litre tank, you know, you're going to be filling up once a week. It's going to cost you 15 quid to fill it. I think you'd struggle to do much better than that.
Nice. Steve, Rose, sorry, I forgot my boss's name. Briefly, what's your one?
I'm gonna complicate things slightly because I think there's two bits to this question.
It's not like you.
I think it depends whether, if you're only going to have one bike and you want to use that bike at weekends, but you also want to commute on it for £2,000, that's a different decision to something. If you've already got a bike that's your weekend bike and you want to buy a second bike for £2,000 to commute. If it's the latter, if you're going to buy a second bike to commute on, then I think for me it's all about cost, and it's all about something that's nimble and cheap to repair, cheap to service. So it's things like, you know, it will be something like a one of the 500s, or to be fair, the V-Strom 250, I think Steve said, is a, you know, really nice choice. But the kind of Honda, you know, CB500 range, the kind of the latest generation, or the Honda CBF 600s, which had the kind of detuned CBR Hornet engine, kind of very, very underrated bike. It's not an exciting sports bike, but it's a really just good workhorse. Cheap to run, reasonably reliable, well put together, can go through a winter. You get a fair version of it. But also, I think don't discount the scooter thing. It's really easy as riders, and particularly if you've got a big bike in the garage, to think scooters aren't for me. But this is a completely different way of using a bike. If you're going to commute, you want something that's nimble, got a bit of storage, does really good fuel consumption, you know, a bit of weather protection, and the sort of the 125cc 250 scooters are terrific, you know, and they're good value. They've usually been looked after, usually been serviced. You know, people, they might not be interested in bikes, but if the service schedule says service it now, they get them serviced, and they're really good value second hand. I think as far as the bigger stuff goes, if you're buying one big bike, it's kind of it's think about what you're going to be using it for. You know, commuting on a sports bike is horrendous. You soon get fed up with it. It's very tempting to go for something, you know, to see a Blackbird for £2,000 and go, oh, look, it's a Blackbird, it's 180 miles an hour. That's not what you need for this. Having said that, you know, one of the bikes I'm going to end up recommending clearly is a Phase 1000 because I bought it for that purpose.
Do you happen to have one for sale, Steve?
No, no, I'm missing mine. But you know, 1,600 quid I paid for mine. They've gone up a bit recently because everything seems to have gone up a bit. But you know, 1,600 quid for a 38,000 mile bike. It's got what Nick was saying earlier. It's got narrow handlebars. It's got mirrors that fold in on a Daytona. So when you finish filtering, you fold them back out and they go back to where they were. It's a really easy bike to filter on. It does, if you're riding it carefully, it does 55 to the gallon. It's got a big petrol tank. It's comfortable. It's low. It's easy to manage. And it's those kind of bikes. I mean, I'm talking about the Phaser, but Honda CBF 1000 would be similar if you can get one for that kind of money. Yeah, it's that. But that's the difference for me. It's whether you're buying one bike or whether, you know, to be your only bike, or whether you want in a second bike.
Yeah. So put us all to shame, Nick, and tell us the facts about what we should buy.
All right, okay. So, realistically, you can't have two. You can't have a bike that you commute on and a bike for fun, because you can't ride it around all week sensibly, trying to conserve brake pad wear and tyre wear and chain wear and fuel consumption and all that, and then just blow it all to pieces on a Saturday afternoon by going out and thrashing the nuts off it and getting even more wear and tear on the bike. So for me, you can't have both. It's got to be, you've got to have one bike to go to work on and one bike for fun. You can't use a bike that's fun to go to work, because that's how you end up in an ambulance, because you can't ride to work with the mentality of trying to beat the clock, trying to beat the traffic, trying to do all that. So for me, you've got to find the most boring motorbike ever to ride to work, because it's going to keep you safe and it's going to be cheap, and it keeps you in the mentality of trying to save money, which is what it's all about. Now, if I've tried to do it on two sort of parameters. So one, if you're doing 30 miles, which is what most of my customers do to work, so that's 30 miles an hour. Some of them are going around the M25 and then going up to Reading, or, you know, the other way round and into Kent and stuff like that. If you're on the motorway, then for me, you need something with fairing, you need something with shaft drive, and stuff like that to keep you dry. And obviously it's high wear rate because you're on the motorway. If you're the other set of customers are going down the M1, down the A1, quick dash down the motorway, and then they're going into the city or into central London, then that's a totally different bike as well. Okay. Now, it's funny you say about the Suzuki, because I've been doing my research, and my one that I've got in stock at the moment knocks everyone's out the park. It's so if you were going to London and you wanted cheap transportation, this thing's got a top box, heated grips. It's 1,500 quid. It's 2015, and I think it's got about 13,000 miles on it at 1,500 quid. And it's going to do it. It's going to plunder down the M1 or the A1, you know, 70 miles an hour, fine. And it's going to go through the traffic. It's got, it's ULEZ compliant, which means that you can park it in town, because that's another thing you have to worry about. If you're buying a commuter and you're going into town, you want to worry about stuff like that, because it's just going to cost you money. So then at that, I also found a 250 for £2,000. These are both dealers, so they will come with the warranty. I mean, we sell our bikes with a year's MOT, but generally dealers do, or it'll have a long MOT on it. It was, this one was 12,000 miles at £2,000, CBF 250, which obviously is ULEZ compliant. Now, I also did a bit of research. If you buy a bike that isn't ULEZ compliant, there are companies out there that will rolling road test it, and also take the knock information off the logbook, and you can get it through. That normally costs about £200 or £300. If it doesn't go through because there's something wrong with it, they charge 50 quid for a retest. And also, just quickly to touch on that, they pretty much have done a lot of models now. So if you call up and say, I'm thinking of buying this, but it isn't ULEZ compliant, will it go through? And then it will come down more to the general running of the vehicle, rather than if it will or will not. Okay, but those are the two bikes that I picked for going into London. For not going into London, we have all the BMW R1150Rs, R1150 RTs. They will munch up the miles like you wouldn't believe. They're a boxer engine. They're not water cooled. They haven't got all this sophisticated stuff that's going to go wrong, and they will just munch up the miles. I did 40,000 on my R1150 RT, and it was just really easy to service, really cheap to maintain. The tyres weren't that big on it, and it was cheap to run. The Honda DeVille 700, again, under £2,000. That's a bit more technical, you know, it's water cooled and stuff, so there will be more bills to it. But for me, my under £2,000 has got to be the R1150 RT. Can't beat it. It won't get you into London, but I'm sure you can get it tested and get it done. But I actually love that bike. It was a good, you know, it was handled well, braked well, and basically did everything I wanted to do, but was a bit wide around the A406, even without the panniers on. But that's my sort of £2,000-ish recommendation. But what I will say, guys, is that please watch what you buy privately for under £2,000, because you don't want to end up with bills when you get it home or get it to a dealer. You're better off paying a dealer, taking it, ask the seller to take it to a dealer, get the dealer to check it over for you. If you have to pay him, and get it checked out. But yeah, that's the bit of research I did about it, and I just thought to sort of generalize it, it all depends on your journey, but you want it to have little brakes, little tires, very boring, you know, anything that's going to be exciting and flash colours and, you know, different modes and this, that and the other is just going to cost you a fortune, because you're not doing this short term, you're doing it long term. So you've got to keep it 2 or 3 years. You're going to want to stick 30, 40,000 miles on it without it costing you a lot of money.
I think what you're saying as well about, it's like, I love my ZX6 and that cost me $1,000, probably about £500 worth of parts and everything on it. But it took me right through winter, right through Christmas to holiday to do all the work on it, you know, and obviously did some work with Nick, and then I did a lot of work myself. Took a lot of time. So if you're prepared to do that, possibly, but this is a terrible commuter, really, isn't it? I mean, like, these have those Takiko 6-pot calipers that they were anodized, but then machined out for the space for the seals. So the corrosion builds up behind the seals, pushes the seals out and jams up the pistons, doesn't it? So these are awful commuter bike, and as
well, everything's so exposed on it, isn't it? Because it's not built for the weather.
Yeah. But that actually takes us quite nicely into maintenance. Now, Nick, you're quite passionate about basic maintenance, aren't you? You sell bikes. You're a certified MOT tester. You own the shop. You've got a bike behind you there that's being worked on at the moment. Tell us a bit about basic maintenance.
Customers do not know what this is. How I haven't lost my hair over the years of trying to explain people what general maintenance is. That's part of the MOT, but then they only do it once a year, it seems, because it comes back next year and it's at the same state as it did the year before. You know, it's shocking. The stuff that I've sent to you, John, and the stuff that I've seen, you know, working here at the shop is just shocking. And the horrible bit of it is that I get the same thing every time I give them back their bike. They'll ring me and say, "Wow, Nick, what have you done to my bike? It's great." And I'm thinking, but your owner's manual tells you should do this, you know, and people just ignore it. It costs them money, you know, because they choose to ignore it. How some people ride the bikes with no air in the tyres, you know, they should get into racing, because if they can ride it at speed like that, if you get one that works properly, they'll be flying, you know.
Basic maintenance doesn't have to be expensive, does it? You know, like looking after your bike, it's that they're faced with the bills if you ignore the basic maintenance. And you've said you've had, you know, people will sometimes complain. Certainly when I'm writing these features about maintenance and how to do jobs yourself, I always ask you for a quote of what you charge people. And I'm often like, that seems pretty good. And I know it's easy for me to say, oh, you know, 100 quid isn't bad, but it soon adds up. And obviously you can't always afford 100 quid, but you've seen people saying, I'm not paying that, haven't you?
Yeah. It never, I mean, we had a guy in, a policeman in the other day that obviously has just put new tyres on the bike, and he came in for MOT and the head races were notchy. Now, if you think about it, if the garage he went to just fitted the tyres, that's fine, but he didn't fit the tyres with us, but we would have noticed the head races, and then that would have been 2 bills in one.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're fitting a set of tyres and the head races, and they've got a £300 or £400 bill. And I think, well, that's just bloody expensive. But the problem is that how long has the head races been like that?
Yeah.
And how bald were the tyres when he took them off? Like, I think I've told you before, John, I changed my tyres at 3 mil, purely because I do a lot of motorway work, and that's when I find they start to square off. I don't, you know, feel like I'm getting the best out of the tyres. And don't get me wrong, you know, we get them cheaper and I fit them myself and all that. But what if I told you I've got customers that have offered me money for my tyres? So I'm taking them off because they obviously are not right. And I've got people trying to buy them off me so they can stick them on their bikes. You know, and it's just crazy.
I think with that basic maintenance stuff, it is about keeping your costs down just by keeping on top of it. Let's run through. I've got some great footage which we will show now of some of the things you've seen in there. That
I apologise to the customers if they recognise their bike.
Oh yeah. Steve Lamb and I came to see you a while ago, didn't we? And you had a Firestorm in there, that simple loose chain. They didn't tighten their chain. And tell us about that.
Yeah, so we picked it up. He basically uses it to go into central London at odd times, so can't really use public transport, so has to use his bike. We get a lot of that with policemen and stuff. If they're early term, there's no trains or anything, they need to get to work and get home. He basically just didn't adjust his chain. There was nothing wrong with the chain. It wasn't rusty or anything like that. It just got so loose that maybe a violent gear change, or just pulled away a bit quickly, basically came off the sprocket and wrapped itself around the front one. Now, in doing that, I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, it's a VTR 1000, so the exhaust probably protected his leg a bit, but he definitely took out the chain guard and the front housing. So it's just a lot of money for the sake of a 10, 15-minute job, which you should be doing every sort of, you should be checking it maybe once a week or every 500 miles, just to make sure that it's right. Now, if you keep your chain under tension and obviously lubricate, it will last longer. That's why we fit Scott oilers, and Scott oilers are a proven fact that if the chain is well lubricated, you actually get less adjustments as well as more miles. So, so if even if you're not adjusting it regularly, if you're lubricating it regularly, then you will get more miles out of it.
Just adjusting a chain costs you nothing. It's an easy job to learn. It might be that you need to buy some kind of stand, but there's other stuff like fork seals. The fork seals are completely blown on this bike when I got it, but you've sent me footage of fork seals that are blown that are so bad that they're pouring oil onto the brake discs, and that's just dangerous, isn't it?
He had travelled from the other side of London with his mate on the back to pick up a bike that I'd sold him, with the fork seals totally blown and oil all over the brakes, and the front tyre was near on board. That's crazy, because you've just endangered your friend by putting him on the back, and then you've carted it across London to come pick up this motorbike, and where's your daily checks? And if you did know that it was blown, why haven't you fixed it? I mean, most motorcycle shops, we're not that busy that we can't squeeze you in 1 week, or most main dealers, because they're knocking out new ones, they might have a 2 week, 3 week turnaround. But most little garages, we're working on a week or 2 weeks. We'll get you in. There's no reason, but it's the cost.
Yeah. What would you say are the main things every motorcyclist should know how to do, and that they should do daily, weekly, whatever?
If you haven't ridden your bike in 3 weeks, realistically, if you want to ride it at the weekend, on the Wednesday, you should be going in, putting the battery on charge, checking the tyre pressures, checking the lights, checking that, there's no leaks on the floor and stuff like that. Now, in your CBT, they teach you to do daily checks. Now, that might be a bit over the top, but you will see stuff, If, for instance, you park it in the same place and all of a sudden you've got a coolant leak, an oil leak, or anything like that, the last thing you need to do is drive down the road and have coolant and oil going all over the back tyre, Or if, as you're riding along, most people end up looking at the clocks and then looking down the side of the fairing. If you look in there and you see the fork seals are blown, why ride it?
Yeah.
It's no fun riding it because it's not working properly, it's one of them.
It's all in the owner's manual as well, isn't it? It is just the basic maintenance. And I know it's hopefully something we'll be doing more of, but certainly I think you just said it now, that if somebody wants to come to a shop like yours and get help, that's what you're there for, isn't it?
If you don't know, it's always better to ask than to ignore.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how to adjust your chain, I'll gladly, most dealers will either charge you or gladly show you. Because realistically, what we want you guys in for is general maintenance that's staggered. So you know what it's going to cost you when it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
What we don't want is you guys coming in because things have fallen off it, or coming once a year for an MOT and have a build from here to Timbuktu. Because if motorcycle shops or our shop is geared up to basically, show motorcyclists a good time and basically invite customers to enjoy their motorcycling experience to the point where they go and recommend it, so we can have more you know, more motorcyclists on the road. If every time you come in, you keep getting a silly bill and eventually you go, oh, sod this and sell it, we lose the motorcyclists.
Yeah.
We lose the motorcyclists. It's no good to us. No good to business. It's no good to the industry.
Well, that's good. I reckon just before we wrap up, I just want to run through some of the real gems that you sent me. We've had tyres seem to be one you're getting quite a lot, from cracked stuff to valve repairs and puncture repairs.
Yeah. So I sent John, we had a customer in for a service, and as the sort of checks went on, we rotated the wheels to check that there's no nails or tears or anything in the tyres. And I don't know if you're going to put the picture up, but I came across this and just couldn't believe it. You know, so I rang the customer up and I said to him, "Do you want us to repair the rear puncture?" He says, "No, I've put a bit of gaffer tape on it in a cross shape, and it seems to be working fine." I said, "Yeah, but that's not really gonna sort of, you know, it's not a very good repair, because obviously the tarmac and the tyre, the friction's gonna wear it out eventually, and you'll be stuck somewhere." And he said, "Oh, but I just need it to last till payday, you know, it'd be, you know, it's fine at the moment, you know," and just started backpedaling so we don't do the work, you know, in it.
Yeah.
But the other one was great, was, so we had a guy in who the tyre was trashed. I think this one was a video I sent you, and the tyre was trashed, and I said to him, what's going on? He says, "Oh, well, I need to change the valve on it because I'm doing a track day and I think the tyre will pass scrutineering, but they definitely won't let me on with the valve." So I had to look at it, and he taped the valve against the rim. And when I took the tape off, it was because if you moved the valve, it had actually cut all the way through and the air was leaking. But the joke is that he rode that to the shop like that. See, the thing is, it's all about price and all about quote and stuff. And, you know, a lot of people are not reading between the lines. So say, for instance, we fit a tyre that comes with balance and that comes with a new valve. Now, if you're not checking, it could be that, you know, you're getting a cheaper price, but are you getting a new valve? Are you getting a wheels balance? Or is it just the tyre fitted? So that tyre, that valve to perish like that has been on there for years. And we generally find that it's always bikes that we don't see that just turn up, you know, because our stuff that comes in and out all the time, you know, when they're regularly serviced and maintained, they don't have these problems. It's the ones that are not used. You know, they think, well, I had it serviced 2 years ago. I've only done 280 miles since then, so it's not due a service, you know, and stuff like that. And that's the mentality that has to change, really. You know, you have to look after your bike, even if you're not using it.
I want to do my two other favourites. You had one where somebody had made a fork leg out of filler or something, hadn't they, and then painted it?
Yeah, so it turned up for MOT. I mean, it wasn't leaking, and it you know, it's the grey hair. But what he had done is he basically put, like, I think it was gum or some sort of paste all over the fork seal and the fork leg, and then he painted the whole leg. Like, so even the dust cover wasn't black anymore. That had paste and paint all over it, and it was just hilarious to see it. You know, like, crazy stuff, crazy.
Well, it was that, and finally, you sent me a caliper that had been zip tied to the fork.
Oh yeah, so that was a bike that ended up coming on a recovery truck, and it was misfiring. The wire to the coil on I think it was the rear cylinder had corroded off, and that was the why it came in. It obviously tried to undo it or something, and it snapped the lug off the fork leg. So the top of the caliper's not actually held onto the fork leg. It's just got the bottom on, but it can pivot because it's on the bottom bolt. So what he decided to do was cable tie the caliper to the leg, to which I brought it to his attention and said, "Listen, we fixed the misfire. It was just you know, corroded wire on the coil. What about this fork leg?" He says, "Yeah, I've been meaning to do it. I've got a new one at home."
I think we should stop there. Guys, it's been great talking to you. I don't know if there's anything very briefly either of the Steves wanted to add or...
Basic maintenance, it doesn't have to be difficult, really. I think we all love our Haynes manuals, 40% discount for rewards customers at the moment. So, for the sake of probably a pint, you can buy yourself a manual. That'll hold your hand as you go through even the most basic of procedures. Certainly for me, it gives me great satisfaction when I carry out even simple things. On the Scrambler, I just pulled the brake discs out the other day. Just had a quick measurement, make sure they're all okay, ready for the next season. Only had a service just before Christmas, but I did about 300 miles around the Cotswolds with rapid training on some of their training days. So you just think, well, maybe some dust got in there, or some grit, or a stone got in there. Let's just have a quick look. It took half an hour. At the end of it, you have a nice warm feeling that everything's okay. So it doesn't have to be stripping engines apart and spending weeks doing jobs. Even just the most basic stuff. I know we're fortunate that we've got garages that are not that warm, but at least dry. Appreciate some people are out there on their driveway, but it just makes you wonder why people just don't do the basic checks.
Yeah.
I think for me as well, is the thing that makes the difference for me is having the right tools. I spent years with amassing a huge number of tools in an old chest that were just the remnants of motorcycle toolkits that I had under the seat of bikes I bought, or an old socket set that I kind of nicked off my dad probably 35 years ago, and various bits and pieces and some dodgy screwdrivers. And then I wonder why fixing my bike seems so difficult. And a couple of years ago, I just threw the whole lot away and bought myself just one big toolkit. This one came from Halfords. Halfords do, it was about 100 quid, and it's got sockets.
Rewards members.
Sorry?
10% off for Bennett's Rewards members.
Yeah, 10% off for Bennett's Rewards. It's got every socket you need in metric or imperial. It's got a whole load of screwdrivers. It's got different handles. They're not the greatest quality. I'm sure they're not kind of what you'd use, what Nick would use if you work in the workshop every single day. But they're brilliant for what I want. The sockets fit, the spanners fit, nothing rounds off. You don't end up rounding off half the nuts on your bike. It just makes it so easy, because for things like adjusting the chain, you just go, okay, I need that socket. I've got that size wrench. Off we go. You can unfasten things without having to jump on them and try and fashion some kind of great leverage system. It made a massive difference. I'm one of those. I'm part of that generation who grew up riding bikes as a nipper, and we never learned to repair bikes. We never learned the lesson about buying the right bike. We just bought the biggest, fastest bike we could afford, which was also the most knackered example of that bike in town, because that's why it was cheap. And so we spent our whole life having to bodge things because we couldn't afford to take them anywhere to get them fixed. And now we're old enough not to have to do that. We've just sort of got out of the habit. And I still have to stop myself being that bodger. But having a decent toolkit, it does make a massive difference.
Cool. No, brilliant. It's been great. I really think if we can all keep on top of our bikes while we're in lockdown, this is going to be over at some point soon. And it's going to be, I should warn you now, Boss Steve, I won't be in probably for 2 weeks once lockdown's out, because I've got lots of riding to do, testing kit. Basically, it's just an excuse that I'm going to be out riding all the time. And we are all going to have some of the best rides we've ever had when this is over. And I would recommend, not just saying it because he's here, but Nick, your coffee mornings full of croissants and cake.
Yeah, so we started doing them a couple of years ago purely because of that. Every time customers used to say to me, every time I come in here, it costs me money. And I used to say, well, it's not my fault you have to come in here. Your bike needs work. So me and my sister Sophie decided to, every last Saturday of the month, we get tea, coffee, cakes, croissants, all sorts of stuff that we shouldn't be eating, and that's all free, 9 till 12 last Saturday of the month. By all means, everyone come down. On a serious side to this sort of podcast that we've sort of done is what I know we've talked about the videos and the funny things that I've sent in, and I apologise to the customers if they recognise their bikes, but the thing to take away from this is that if you don't look after your bike, it's either going to hurt you or hurt your pocket. If, search for a dealer that is caring, that's going to look after you, that just doesn't want money off you. Because realistically, there are dealers like us that are family run, or workshops. It doesn't have to be a dealership, it could just be a backstreet workshop. But find someone who cares about bikes, so ultimately cares about you as the customer. Yeah. And they will look after you, and you will enjoy riding your bike if it works properly. Yeah. What is the point in riding bikes with tyres down to 2 mil, or where they've got adverse camber on them, where they've worn funny, because they all start to wear funny, and chains that have got tight spots in them, or brake pads that are so old the backing's falling off, and because if you really get into maintenance on a high level, if you really into it, it's not only wear that gives you performance out of your parts. Yeah, so some stuff is age related. So if you talk to tyre people, they'll tell you 5 years and they've gone hard, forget them. Why do riders that race only do a certain amount of heat cycles? Or if you do track days, you'll know there's only a certain amount of heat cycles, and then you lose the grip. So if you've got a bike and it's 10 years old and the tyres are 10 years old, you're not getting the best out of those tyres. So like I say, what I would take away from this, guys, is that start to take note of what is on your bike, because buying a bike which is 15 years old, which is 10,000 miles, that's got no service history on it, is not good condition. That is not, you're better off buying a bike that's been regularly maintained, that's got 40,000 miles on it, with a full service history, than a bike that's been sitting in the garage because it's got low mileage and no scratches on it. You think you bought yourself a bargain? Well, you haven't, because the chances are that every bit of rubber, all the bearings, everything are all corroded. If no one's been through it, and it's not going to work properly, and you're not going to enjoy it. So as my sort of bit, I would say that, all jokes aside and all that, just look after your bike, because it will look after you and it will look after your pocket.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thanks, Nick. So all really I've got left to say is a big thanks again to our sponsor, Petronas Sprinter Motorcycle Engine Oil. Massive thanks for that. It's helping us put this out. We really hope everybody's enjoying it. Next week, we're going to have Stuart Higgs, boss of BSB, as our special guest. Also, the rest of the Bike Social team, we're going to be telling you what we think is the best 3K sports bike that you can buy. Questions or comments at all, put them in the comments below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook. We want to hear from you and, help us shape what we've got coming up. So thanks again to everybody for this, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers. Cheers.
Shit, I forgot to record it.
As soon as he said it, he didn't want it, because he said the handlebars are too wide. Really? He said, with the Triumph, it's nice and narrow, he folds the mirrors in, and he's gone.
This definitely isn't gin, because my contract says I can't drink in work time. That's special circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Working from home's all right.